Innovative.
Impressive.
Citizens. Insightful. Sustainability.
Recycling.
Business. Excited.
Imagine city possible.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to be here. First of all, thank you so much to the NIA for the invitation, and thanks to all of you for being here this morning. It makes the whole thing so much more enjoyable. Now, what you just saw was a glimpse of Smart City Expo World Congress, which is the event that we organize in Barcelona every year, already since 2011. But before I talk a little bit about that, I'd like to give you also a glimpse about Barcelona as a smart city. I'm sure some of you have been to Barcelona already, so you're probably somewhat familiar with it. But there's a lot of rankings that try to measure to what degree cities are actually smart. And it's very hard to tell which rankings are accurate to begin with, because many of them have different criteria. Others, they may also have a certain agenda maybe, or interests behind what they're trying to measure. But when you look at all the rankings and you realize that there is a trend whereby Barcelona is always ranking consistently high, then you do believe that there are indeed a number of things that we are doing well as a city. And I think that's what applies to Barcelona. Now, regarding innovation, I think that's particularly interesting because Barcelona has been able to become the mobile world capital. And it's been able to do so in part because it's become the venue where we host the Mobile World Congress, the largest event for the mobile phone industry, but also because we have created an entire ecosystem of startups, of mid-sized companies, of large companies, and of course, of some different public entities that are providing also support for this entire industry to thrive. So Barcelona indeed is a top smart city, and now I'll just try to give you a little bit of an overview on what we've been doing and what we're trying to achieve. So first of all, as I said, we need to understand and define what a smart city is. There's probably as many definitions as people in this room, but for us, it basically comes down to these things. First of all, it's about ensuring that there is more efficiency, which means basically getting the same results with less cost, whether it's financial cost, whether it's environmental cost. Secondly, it's about sustainability, and I think that rings truer than ever in Asia because of the trends that we have here in terms of the demographics and in terms of the kind of growth that countries in Asia are experiencing. So we need to ensure that we are able to sustain this kind of growth in the long run. And then that's a very important thing. We need to ensure that all these kind of improvements actually touch the lives of as many citizens as possible. Because we talk a lot about becoming smarter, but then if we're not able to actually ensure that the kind of improvements that we make do have an effect on everyone's lives, then I don't think we can really say that we've been successful in our endeavors. So when you take these three things together and you try to get to that kind of situation by using ICTs and technology and innovation, I think that kind of closes the circle of what defines a smart city. And this is exactly what Barcelona has been trying to do for quite a few years already. Now, if that's a smart city, then that also tells us, by contrast, what a smart city is not. And we believe that it's very hard to build a city from scratch and pretend that it's a smart city. To begin with, because cities are such complex entities that there's got to be a bit of everything in them. There's got to be the citizens, there's got to be the companies, there's got to be the jobs, there's got to be all sorts of different demographics, the elderly, the children, the young professionals, the experienced professionals, and you can't quite replicate that by just taking some land and trying to come up with a new city from scratch. So we're never going to consider those kind of places as smart cities. Neither are we going to consider smart cities pilot projects, as ambitious or as useful as they may be. They're something else. Sometimes they're necessary. We in Barcelona have also been doing some pilot projects, some innovation districts, some areas where we test stuff, but that's something else. That's not a smart city. So that also takes us to a very basic idea, which is that every city doesn't start from scratch, and so we all have a different past. And this is why smart city solutions are going to be different for every single city, because the starting point is different. And so because the starting point is different, solutions also need to be different. So for instance, if we look at Barcelona, let me just tell you a couple of things about our past. One is that we have a very, I guess, well-known grid system. Some of you may be familiar with it if you've studied urban development or architecture. There's many cities in Europe that have a grid, even some in the United States do. Manhattan is a very good example of that. But there's grids and grids. There's many different sorts of grids. And Barcelona's grid not only was one of the very first, but it was also one that kind of made a difference in how it structured the grid. You know, it made sure that there would be walking areas that would be ample enough. It made sure that basically there would be also a certain limitation in terms of the height of the buildings. It also ensured that there would be some kind of equity in terms of the different buildings. So there's a lot of things that have to align for a city's grid to be actually in place and be successful, and that's what Barcelona did. If you're familiar with the Ramblas, where the Ramblas somehow is part of that grid as well, but it's just that it tries to break the general pattern, because we are also aware that cities are not mathematic models. They're not, nor they can pretend to be perfect. So if you have a grid in place, maybe that's going to be a little bit monotonous. You need to break that kind of monotony as well with some other streets like Ramblas. Now, another moment that defines our recent history is the Olympic Games. I'm sure you're familiar with it. That was back in 1992, and it put Barcelona and the whole of Spain again in the spotlight. But for us in Barcelona, it had a deeper meaning, because it transformed the city on many levels. To begin with, as I said, it repositioned the city in many people's minds. But then it was also able to recover the seafront. Funny enough, Barcelona is a coastal city. And if I ask you about Barcelona now, many of you will probably think of Messi, but probably some of you will also think of the nice beaches and the Mediterranean climate and all those things. But only 3 years ago, that was actually hidden from daily life in Barcelona. Barcelona wasn't a city that was looking at the sea. And so the 1992 Olympic Games just helped to change that particular issue. And then, as you can tell by the picture, it also allowed us to create a completely new mobility model so that the city's downtown wouldn't be so packed by traffic jams, and traffic would somehow go through its outer areas. So Barcelona's strategic axis is based on 3 pillars. First one is execution of local projects. Second one is the cooperation with the citizens, with international entities. And the third point is the international promotion. So I'll just give you a glimpse of some of the examples of each of those different things that we've been doing. When it comes to local projects, well, I think one of the basic projects that any smart city should have in place has to do with open data. Because First of all, that costs almost nothing to the city. But most importantly, and particularly in innovative ecosystems like the one we have here, I think that's what actually enables and allows startups to develop new projects and new applications. That's the most precious thing that a city can put into citizens' hands. It's not tax exemptions, it's not a place where they can work, it's actually the data that they work with. And so if we're able to let users and startups and the industry work with the city's data, I think great things can happen without the city having to be so involved into what the private sector is doing. So it's allowing them to work with a lot more freedom. Public Wi-Fi, again, it's the ABC, it's going to basics, but we cannot have a smart society or a smart city where we're always talking about technology, connectivity, applications, and then people struggle potentially with the connection to the internet in the cities. So ensuring that cities do have public Wi-Fi available, this is one of the priorities that we have set and that we see many other cities also setting in their own agendas. That's a mobility project that you may also be familiar with. It's called Bissing. It was quite a pioneering initiative back in the day when it was put into place. It's basically trying to ensure that car is not the only option for citizens to move around in the city. It should still be an option. I don't think we should be banning the use of cars by any means, but we should make sure that citizens are provided other alternatives so that they can choose the one that fits them best. And that's exactly what we did. With smart traffic lights, if we go back to the social side of things that I talked about at the beginning, I think that's a good example of that as well, because smart traffic lights are what allow, for example, the blind people to be able to cross the streets. That's what allows the fire brigades to move without having to potentially wait for the traffic light to turn green, because there is a system in place that allows them to do so. So there's a number of different advantages that we can definitely put in place by using smart traffic lights. Now, the Fab Labs, that's not that much of a local project, but a cooperation project. Barcelona and many cities in the developed countries, have become pretty much services-centered cities. There are cities where the industry is not that important anymore. We've sort of externalized the industry maybe to other parts of our countries or even to other countries. And that's something that's very true in Europe and the United States in particular. But in doing so, we have also lost a lot of our knowledge and a lot of our talent. And so we're trying to make sure that we are again able to produce the kind of goods that we need to use, because otherwise we're too dependent on, other parties' industries, and that makes us vulnerable as well. So we've come up with the Fab Labs, and the Fab Labs try to use the 3D printing, the IoT, all the new solutions that have come out of innovative ideas for us, again, the citizens of the cities to be able to produce part of what we need in order to live. The Smart City Campus is another good example of cooperation. This is something that we have in place in the 22@, which is the innovation district of Barcelona. And basically, we try to bring together all the different parties, all the different stakeholders that are involved in the smart city industry. So this means that we're going to have, of course, the companies, big or small, it doesn't matter, a lot of startups, but then we're also going to have the universities and the academia and the public sector working hand by hand in order to make sure that some of these projects that are still maybe at an early stage are eventually going to be put into practice. Innovation, fostering, and partnerships is essential. That's something that Barcelona has already been doing for many years. Back in the day, the structure in the city council was so much, let's say, into silos, and then we broke down those silos to make sure that no matter what kind of project we're talking about, it has to be related to the overall smart city strategy that we have. So this is something that we've been doing with the private sector and also with international actors, with other cities from which we've been learning. We've been trying to emulate some of their best practices, and they've been doing the same with us. So ultimately, it's a win-win situation. This is the video that you guys just saw at the beginning, so I won't make you watch it twice. But now moving forward to the Smart City Expo World Congress. The Smart City Expo World Congress is probably the paramount example of the kind of promotion that we're trying to put in place as far as smart city trends are concerned. Because this is a place where more than 15, 16, 18,000 people gather together every year from all corners of the world to discuss what are the best practices, the best initiatives in the field of smart cities. So you already saw the figures in the video, but I think more important than the figures is probably the fact that it's an event that's been growing every single year since 2011 at double-digit figures. And I think as much as we think this is partly due to our good work, it also has to do with the evolution of the industry, because at the end of the day, every event mirrors how an industry is doing. And so this just shows that there is a massive potential and massive opportunities in the smart city industry. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this kind of growth, because there's virtually no other industry that can compare in terms of growth. So Smart City Expo World Congress has two main components. One is the Expo, or the exhibition area. Here you can see a picture of it. And what's unique about it is that we have both the private players and the public sector. So it's not just a place for cities to meet other cities. It's not a place for companies to show their solutions. It's mostly a place for business, actually. It's a place where cities and governments can look for solution providers in order to ask them how can they help them develop their smart city strategies. And likewise, private companies are going to come up with products and solutions and services, and they're going to be able to show those to the cities, which at the end of the day happen to be the clients. So here you can see some of the private companies that participate at Smart City Expo. As you can tell, there's virtually every big name on the list. And then you can also see some of the cities and countries that take part in it. Again, you've got cities and countries from the United States, from Southeast Asia, certainly a lot of participants from the Philippines, from Malaysia, from Singapore, from Indonesia. And we're hoping we can have also a much bigger participation from Thailand in 2018. This is our goal, and that's what we're working for. Now, when it comes to the Congress, this is also a Congress that tries to cover all the different areas of smart cities, which means we don't just focus on technology and innovation, although it's a big part of it, but we also tackle all the other topics that we think are relevant. So, of course, we'll be talking about technology, but we'll be also talking about society, about public safety, about governance, about sustainability, energy models, urban planning, and, of course, mobility. That has become probably the #1 priority for many cities, especially in this part of the world. How can we make mobility less of a problem, less of a hassle? How can we make sure that it doesn't pollute our cities as much? So trying to come up with a solution to some of those challenges is certainly a big part of what we try to do in Barcelona every year. Now, it's also a wonderful place for networking. We do help participants have an agenda of pre-arranged meetings depending on their goals and interests. We are happy to provide them with the right connections. And so here you can see, for example, the amount of meetings that we've been able to help participants schedule in the past. Again, this figure is only growing year after year. And last year we were very proud to reach the 1,500 figure. And finally, just a few words on the 4 years from now, because I think that's particularly relevant to this forum. If you're familiar with the Mobile World Congress, you may already know that there is an entire area dedicated to startups. And so they're able to pitch to investors, to business angels, to equity funds, to large companies that are maybe looking for joint ventures, or they may be also looking to acquire them. So there's many different reasons why they may be pitching, but what matters is that they are given this floor and this opportunity to actually show the kind of work that they're doing. And we do exactly the same. We have an area in the very heart of the exhibition area where startups from all over the world are able to participate. And so they get an unparalleled exposure that they wouldn't be getting anywhere else if their goal is to expand, if their goal is to look for funds, whatever their goal is, as far as they're doing work in the smart city industry, that is the place where they can take the most of it. So This is all from my side. I want to thank you again for your attention, and hopefully I'll see many of you in Barcelona very soon. The event is going to take place in November 13 to 15, so we look forward to welcoming you all to our event. Thank you so much.